It's only one, Moz.
Uncensored, and sitting across from me is my co-host.
What it do? What's good? It's your brother SamAnt, viral hip hop news. We're in the building. It's another episode of the Uncensored podcast, a very special episode of the Uncensored podcast. Oh God, what's good, my brother?
What's good? What's good? As you know, we always like to bring, professionals in the community, and this is going to be a special interview because there's a woman right here is an attorney, practicing out, I think, in New York and some other areas. So, very respected, by a lot of different people. So I definitely want to hear, her opinion. So I'm going to let the sister introduce herself and, we'll go from there. Peace.
Peace. Thank you for having me on. My name is Ikiesha Al-Shabazz. For those of you who don't know me, I have a platform called Ikiesha Speaks. I'm an attorney here in New York City. I'm a former prosecutor. Currently, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I'm also a former professor of law. I'm a current adjunct professor at a CUNY college. And I'm a legal informationalist. I'm here. I try to give information, not advice, so that people can try to keep themselves out of the ensnares of the criminal justice system. So I'm hoping that some of the videos and things that I'm doing, educating people so that they can govern themselves accordingly. And let me just say, for the record, I'm home in my home office, so if you hear my dogs bark, I apologize now in advance, because I can't control them. I can a little bit, but you might hear that.
Yeah, no doubt. I have pets too, so that's no problem. I want to start off though and just really get your inspiration on at what point did you know you wanted to become a lawyer? Can you kind of take us back to that, part in your life?
It's funny because other people have told me that I've always told them since I was 10 years old that I was going to be a lawyer. I have some recollections of that. I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, in South Jamaica, Queens, in a housing development, aka projects, known as 40 Project. And so growing up in the heyday of the crack era, I witnessed a lot of injustice. And so I think I then became enraged at the system at a very young age, and took it upon myself to fix it, right? I thought that would be my cross to bear, that I would fix the system for my people. And that's what I pursued. So I went to college. It's a long journey through college. I got kicked out. I was fighting. It wasn't cute, but I was a tough kid. And so ultimately was able to get back into college, graduate from college, and go on to New York Law School and graduate with a Juris Doctor. And that's when I started practicing law back in 2001. So I've been doing this now almost 18 years. Almost 18 years.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to also ask you first because what made you actually want to be a prosecutor first? Because that's two different sides, of the law, and obviously we can see, this is a passion of yours from young. So what made you jump on to the prosecution side first, as opposed to starting to defend people?
Okay, so I did not want to be a prosecutor. My whole goal was to be a defense attorney. I actually had been a defense investigator for 3 years. While I was in law school, I went to law school part-time and I worked full-time in the day. So I was hell-bent on being a defense attorney. But then it got to the point where I was sending out resumes to defense organizations and also to prosecutors' offices, and I was getting interviews at the DA's offices. I wasn't getting the interviews with the prosecutors. With the defense attorney. So I happened to get a very prestigious offer. I got an offer from both the Bronx and from Manhattan. And so I took the Manhattan offer because I knew that I would get the experience that I needed to be an effective defense attorney, because you cannot defeat someone if you do not know their playbook. It's a lot easier to do it from this side when you know their side.
Absolutely.
Ms. Shabazz, walk us through your journey as a Black woman going into law and the journey that a lot of Black women go through becoming an attorney. How was that? Was it harder, would you say, in your estimation, than most? Just walk us through that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it was trying. It was difficult. I went to undergrad. I started at Bennett College in North Carolina. got kicked out of there, went to BMCC, ended up at John Jay. I got my bachelor's from John Jay. And when I was at John Jay, I had a counseling session with one of the, one of the career counselors there. And I told him of my aspirations to go to law school. And he did everything he could to talk me out of it. Everything. Oh, you're not going to have time. You're in a relationship. At the time I was married, you're not going to be able to see your husband. You're not going to, everything he could throw at me to discourage me from entering this field, which didn't discourage me at all. But at every turn, you are met with this sense that you don't belong, right? It's similar to my being on a golf course where you are in a field which traditionally is reserved for white men who have some means, not for Black girls from the projects, right? And so at every turn, there was some obstacle that I had to overcome, whether it was people who perceived that I was not as smart as them and therefore did not deserve to be where I was, or people who would try to sabotage your success. So it's been a long journey, and to this day, there is, because of the history of Black people and Black women in particular in this country, I face that every time I go to court. I'm dealing with someone who might perceive me to be either less adequate, less skilled, less smart, less intelligent, less prepared, less adept than they are. And then when I show up, they're surprised because I'm none of those things.
Right. Yeah. I watched one of your videos, and you give a lot of insightful information. I was like, we were just talking before the in a pre-production meeting. It was like, yo, that's a real good lane for her on YouTube, because we specialize in helping people build their YouTube platform. That's a real good lane to just give people. You give them just enough information, but they got to come back for more, and that's one of the keys to marketing. But the Rico, could you speak to us about that? You had a long video. I didn't get a chance to finish it. I wanted to, but can you talk about the Rico case and some of the aspects of that, and what does that really mean? Because a lot of people don't understand what that really means. They just hear the word and they kind of just go with it. Can you explain that?
Okay, so RICO is the racketeering and conspiracy crimes, which there are 33 predicate crimes. So just about anything can fall under a RICO conspiracy. And basically the government is saying that you have a criminal enterprise that is engaging in conduct to maintain that criminal enterprise. And in those acts that you engage in to maintain the criminal enterprise involve either extortion, violence, threats of violence, drug dealing, prostitution, gambling. I can go on and on and on and on and on. And so if you have a criminal enterprise that's engaged in that activity, then the government is going to be looking at you and your conspirators, co-conspirators, and the like, to take that entity, that criminal enterprise down. And that's pretty much what happened in the Tekashi 6ix9ine case. I'm sure that they already had their eyes on the Trey 6ix9ine gang. And so a lot of times the feds, they sit and watch and they wait. And it's not like they don't have evidence, but they wait. And you can see from the indictment, the span of time that's captured in that indictment, it's several years. And so they had been watching them for some time, and then they just wait until they give them enough rope to hang themselves, which they did, which is, the evidence that they picked up on the wiretaps, because people really think they have some sort of expectation of privacy in their phone calls and text messages and emails, when in fact you do not. And so they have all of this evidence now of these individuals inculpating themselves and others. And inculpating, I mean, making themselves guilty, for lack of a better word.
Right. Yeah.
Expounding on 6ix9ine in his case. Now, we talked numerous times about the case, and nauseum, it almost felt like. But in particular, we talked about his legal team and how they almost seemingly felt as though they were taking on a little more spotlight than what they should have. That was just our opinion from the outside looking in. Expound on his lawyer team. Would you do some of the techniques that they're doing, and are they good or bad for 6ix9ine right now?
I think that he has a decent team. I think he has a good team. I actually know one of his attorneys, and I've had some cases with her, and I know that she's an aggressive attorney. She goes to bat for her clients. So I will say that he is well represented. Strategies vary from attorney to attorney, especially when you're dealing with a press case. Sometimes it's best to say nothing. Silence is sometimes golden. But sometimes you do need to push back because you do understand that your jury pool is going to be affected by the information that is out there. And sometimes if that information is so potent and powerful that it could affect the jury pool, you want to somehow neutralize it. And so they may be acting in that capacity. Some of the evidence that's come out has been really good for Tekashi, especially the wire conversations, which really indicate that they didn't consider him to be a member of the Bloods. In that regard. And so that sort of affects the government's ability to say he's a part of the criminal enterprise. It could hurt them, and it could help him with the defense that I wasn't really down, and I sort of didn't know how to get out. I was afraid at that point, at the point where things started to become criminal, I didn't know how to get out, and they threatened me and they stole money from me and things of that nature. And then at that point, he becomes a victim. And we've seen that happen before, where you have Black defendants who have co-defendants who look white or are white, and they get to use the "I'm a victim of these Black dudes" defense. And juries, they buy that. They suck that up because they can't fathom why a clean-cut white kid would be hanging out with all of these hoodlums, quote unquote, or so to speak.
Right. Absolutely. That's a good point. We actually brought that up in the podcast. We said that he's probably going to try to take that whole approach, and that the jurors and the people that watch this stuff on social media will start to make him the victim.
Of course.
In a particular case.
Works, though. It works because he's making real legitimate money. Why would he sacrifice that, right? Unless he's under some sort of duress or some sort of pressure for which he folded, right? The average person is going to understand that. Why would he throw away millions of dollars? He's the only one at the bond hearing who has millions of dollars in the bank. Why would he sacrifice all of that for criminal, to rob somebody, right? To shoot up a barbecue, shoot up a cookout. Why? It's nonsensical. And the average juror is going to think that is antithetical to anyone's behavior who's a rising star. And they will give him the benefit of the doubt, especially if he cleans up a little, right? If he cleans up some of the tattoos and the hair is, back to Leave It to Beaver, because lookism is important in court. Lookism is important. How you appear to a jury is as important as what you're charged with.
Absolutely. Connected to this whole, the 6ix9ine case was the people, pretty much, I call it snitching on themselves on social media, whether it be throwing up gang signs, guys going on there, putting up guns, drugs, all types of stuff. Yeah. Talk about that and talk about the privacy. Do we really have any privacy? Because a lot of these rappers now, you can all you gotta do is scroll through Instagram, you can see somebody incriminating themselves.
Right.
Speak about how many cases that you actually seen, or defended that people, got caught up on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc.
I've had quite a few. I've had quite a few of the credit card scamming cases where you have the guys actually putting pictures up on Instagram, with the caption, "We scamming in these buildings." Wow. Really? And so when so what happens is it's an investigation when these things happen. And the first place that the investigators, whether it's state investigators or DA's investigators or Fed investigators, they're going to social media because they know that these individuals, this group, this era, this generation, they all communicate via social media, right? People don't talk to one another anymore. Everything has to be done through Snap or IG or whatever may have you, through a text. And they think for some reason that they have some reason of privacy because it's their phone or it's my Facebook page or that's my IG page. No, you don't have anything. You don't have anything. And what people don't fail to realize is that every time you sign up for one of these social media services, there's a ridiculously long user agreement that you scroll through without reading, and you hit agree at the bottom because we all do it. Right. You don't, all of that is telling you have no privacy. You have no privacy, and you're not going to not use the platform. So you just agree. Right. And so all the information that you post is available to the government so that they can build a case against you. And they look. And so you can't use the defense. I don't know that guy, because they got the pictures of y'all at the club popping bottles. Right. And so I've seen that. I don't know him. Really? Then why y'all in all these pictures together on social media? Right. And so people have to stop putting stuff on social media. But, unfortunately, this is where they find their value. Right. This is where they find their value in hawking their wares and letting people know that, listen, this is what I got and this is what you don't have. I mean, unfortunately, you're not just showing those people, you're showing the government.
Absolutely. Talking on social media, we all know how it influences the world, and a lot of people now look for their information on the internet. That's their primary source of information. Yeah. Circling back to 6ix9ine and social media and information being disseminated about his case, does it help him or hurt him with the information via YouTube and different platforms and things like that, with people throwing out narratives and you seeing pictures and TMZ obtaining photos and various platforms talking on it? What does that do to a case like 6ix9ine's?
I don't think it's going to do anything to 6ix9ine's case, because I don't think the jury pool in the federal system gives a damn about YouTube, watches YouTube, or TMZ.
Good point.
I really don't. I don't think that the reach is there. I don't think they have an interest in the platforms that many of the people who are on YouTube talking about 6ix9ine, they're not there. They're not checking for that. So I don't think it'll have that effect. And the truth of the matter is, we don't show up for we don't show up for jury duty. Black people don't. You get that questionnaire, you're like, I ain't doing that. Nope. You throw it out, you put it in the garbage, you ignore it, and then you complain about how the system is not fair. But you had an opportunity to participate and you chose not to, right? So you can't complain then. You can't. You can't complain when you stand on the sideline, when you have an opportunity to do something. I've had plenty of jurors of color find a way to get themselves excused, to get off the jury somehow, some way, right? And then turn around, and I'm sure that they are Facebook keyboard warriors who are like, the system is not fair. I'm outraged, right? But they don't do anything about it.
Help ignorant people like myself who think just jury duty is corny, and it's a number of us who think that. I mean, how serious is those kind of things to helping our people out and just helping us as a culture? Little things like jury duty and just talk on voting and things like that.
Jury duty and voting. First, let me say jury duty is huge. It is the most important civic duty that you can do, especially when it comes to Black people in the criminal justice system. Most of the people that are going to trial look like us, and they are entitled to a jury of their peers. And so if we don't show up, who are they going to get? They're not getting a jury of their peers. They're getting jurors who don't understand them, who can't figure out or fathom why or how they could be in a situation that they're in, right? They can't understand that the police, they might just lie, right? Because they don't have the same experience that we have as Black people in America. And so if we don't show up, then we have no representation on that jury. There's nobody going to be in that room of 12 saying, hey, that's not how it really happens, right? What he said is true. That's possible, right? There's nobody to validate the defendant's version of events, or nobody to challenge the prosecutor's version of events, or accept what the defense is saying about what the prosecution versions of events are, right? And so if we don't show up, then there's no check. There's no check. Right? They go in that room and they do whatever they please. There's no perspective. We don't have that in the room. And so that's what happens when you throw away your questionnaire. You deny that the potential for your perspective to be in the room, right? As far as voting is concerned, I think most people misunderstand the importance of voting in our local election, right? Because everyone is always in, dialed into the presidential election, which has the least impact on your everyday life. But the local election for DA in your county, that has more impact on your life than just about any other election, right? And it usually happens every 4 years, and most people don't show up. For instance, in Queens, the DA in Queens, Richard Brown, has been the DA for, I want to say, over 30 years. And many of those years he ran unopposed. He didn't even have a challenger. Nobody. Right? And he had some very draconian policies in that office, but no one would stand up to challenge it. Right? And so now he's stepping down, and there's going to be a huge election in Queens. But are we going to turn out? Are people going to show up? This is not a, it's not a federal, it's not a major federal election, but that's what is important. We got to dial in.
Right. I want to go back. I don't know when this kind of took place, but maybe you can help me remember because you practice in New York, the whole stop and frisk thing going on. Could you speak about, that and how that, negatively affected pretty much how Black and minorities were being targeted by the stop and frisk? Could you speak about some of your experiences in the courtroom system dealing with those type of cases?
Right. Well, stop and frisk is very difficult because anytime you're dealing with any society, we have to balance our freedoms and our securities, right? And we give up certain freedoms to be more secure, right? When you go to the airport, you give up the freedom to be free from search and seizure at that moment because you want to be safe on the airplane, right? And so the same is true for stop and frisk. We are giving up our ability to go about our everyday lives in order so that we can be safe. The problem is that the stop and frisk disproportionately impacted Black and Hispanic men and women more so than any other segment of the community. And unfortunately, I want to say over 97% of the people that were stopped and frisked during the, I forget what period, it's like a 4 or 5 year period that they did this study that was the subject of the federal litigation. But those people hadn't committed any crimes and they weren't arrested, nor did they have any contraband on their person. And so it seemed that those stops were fruitless, right? And just randomly, violating people's constitutional rights, unfortunately. And so at the same time, the argument can be made is that it's effective because it does get some contraband off the street. The problem is that we cannot allow for the violation of few just because we can gain something for the many. That's not the way the Constitution works. In fact, it's the opposite. In fact, we'd rather let some guilty people go free rather than lock up a lot of innocent people.
Absolutely. Working in the judicial system, defending people. Here's a question I want to ask you. Would you say that, because most of us, I know for a fact, we take plea deals. When I got in trouble years back, I took a plea deal. If I fought it, I probably could have beat it. Would you suggest, that more of us, and I'm talking about Black people, in particular, fight more cases rather than take plea deals and get into the system? Because that's going to lead into the next question about the 13th Amendment. Right. Can you expound on that if you can?
The criminal justice system does not have the fortitude to sustain itself if every criminal defendant were to go to trial, which is why the plea rate is somewhere around 85 to 90% of cases that plead out. My issue is that oftentimes when I speak to people about pleas they've taken, that they just don't know. You don't know what you pled to, you don't know why you pled, and you don't know the collateral consequences of your conviction. That's my problem. When you take a plea, it should be knowingly, it should be voluntary, and it should be willful. And you should educate yourself. And that's why you have an attorney. And if the attorney is not giving you the information that you need, get copies of your paperwork, go online and Google. Until you can get an understanding, you should not be pleading guilty, because there is a soliloquy that the judge is going to go through when you plead guilty, they're going to ask you, are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? Yeah, and you have to say yes to all of these questions, or he's not going to take your plea. So are you pleading guilty because you're guilty? Yes. And you've been informed that you're giving up all of these rights, the right to remain silent, the right to have the DA bring this case and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. All of these rights that you're giving up, most people don't understand the import, but they stand there and they're like, yep, yes, yes, yes. And then after the fact, they come back and go, I don't know what I did. Can I undo that? No, you cannot. It is incredibly difficult to take a plea back. And that's why it's difficult, because the judge goes through that whole panoply of questions to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing, right? And so and then the collateral consequences, when people are not understanding, there are immigration consequences. There are consequences if you are trying to get student loans, depending on different types of criminal convictions you have, whether you want to get civil employment. There are so many different collateral consequences that you must consider before you take a plea. So do I think that, pleas I'm not a fan of them. I know that sometimes they are necessary, but you got to evaluate the case. You got to evaluate the client. There's so much that goes into it before you take a plea. And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen with us. And especially if you don't have an attorney that you paid, right? Most of us have assigned counsel, or you have legal aid, or you have a public defender, or whatever they're called in your state, who's overworked and overburdened. And it doesn't mean that they aren't committed and dedicated and capable. They just don't have the time and or the resources to dedicate to each case, right? And so yours might be the case where they're like, look, they're offering you something, it's a good deal, you should take it, right? Where they're not really considering whether or not, one, you are factually guilty, right? Whether or not you did it. Sometimes that's a consideration, not always. We can come back to that. But and whether or not that that plea is going to get you deported, right? Because there are immigration consequences also, depending on the type of plea you take, right? If it's a crime involving moral fortitude, you could be deported. All right, so you got to be careful with pleas, because it's very difficult to undo them.
Correct.
Did you want to continue with the 13th Amendment?
Oh, the 13th. You want?
Yeah. I want you had a video on that.
Yeah.
Could you expound more on the 13th Amendment?
Okay.
And pretty much what it goes into, pretty much saying that is that you're not allowed to be a slave unless convicted of a crime or something. I'll let you, go ahead and explain that.
Okay. All right. A lot of unfortunately, we do not have a well-informed citizenry. Right? That's what this country is supposed to be founded on, a well-informed citizenry. And most people haven't read the Constitution, and most Black people haven't read the parts of the Constitution that apply to them, particularly the 13th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment has what's called an exclusion clause, right? So it sets out to prohibit slavery. But then there is an exclusion clause which says that slavery is permissible, right, if you are convicted of a crime. Now, the Constitution doesn't specify what type of crime, doesn't specify what level of crime. It just says crime, right, which could include a misdemeanor crime, at which point then you do not have the protection of the 13th Amendment anymore. You then can be subjected to slave labor, slave conditions, and that's what happens in the prison. That's exactly what's happening in the prison. You have inmates that are doing for-profit work, and they are making slave wages. They're making 25 cents an hour, 35 cents an hour, and that money goes into the commissary, and then they have to pay the phone bill, right? Because they're charging 50 cents a minute or some crazy mess that they get to do and that they're allowed to do. And, the inmates who have very little rights, they're pretty much, between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. Talk about, Ms. Shabazz, in your time in law, particular in New York, the amount of molestation cases, pedophilia cases that you've seen, to the best of your knowledge, come through. And just talk about the culture of pedophilia and molestation. And that'll obviously transition into our next topic, R.Kelly.
Right.
But just talk about that, and how many cases of molestation and pedophilia have you found coming through in New York? I've
handled quite a few personally. I don't know that there is an uptick, I would say, in recent years in sexual molestation cases. I would say maybe there is more of an uptick in reporting the cases, because there's a difference between things happening more often and things being reported more often, right? That were happening all the time, right? These things may have always been reported, but now with the advent of the Me Too movement and the Time's Up and the Mute R.Kelly, and people are finding their voice, and so more women are reporting incidences of sexual molestation as opposed to keeping it a secret, which most women were taught growing up. If that happens to you, keep it a secret, and you walk with the shame and you carry that with you. So I wouldn't say that there was an uptick, but those are very difficult cases, because you will always have a defendant on the other side of that case, usually a male, saying, I didn't do that. I didn't do those things. I would never do those things. That's not me. That's not who I am. And so, but then you have a victim who's saying, he touched me inappropriately, or he walked into my bedroom when it was dark and, touched me under my clothing, or something to that effect. And so those are difficult cases, and they often, they go to trial. They go to trial because the consequences are so great for a man, that if he's convicted, not only are you going to be in prison, but you likely will be a registered sex offender for the rest of your life. All right. And so the stakes are very high. And if there is, and there seldom is evidence, right? There's seldom there is evidence. Usually these cases are pattern of conduct cases, where a course of conduct, where something is happening over a course of time. And by the time the young woman or young man is comfortable enough or brave enough to speak about it, there's no physical evidence to support their claim. Right. And so then it becomes, it's a sort of attack against the victim as to, well, why didn't you say it sooner? Why didn't you report it sooner? As if that was an option for them, right? Because obviously if it was, they probably would have availed themselves of that avenue. And so it's a lot of people are speaking about this issue who aren't educated about a lot of things, like child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome, which is a real thing that is used in the courts to explain why children or young people delay in telling about sexual molestation. And they bring social workers in to testify about why a child would not disclose for years some type of activity or untoward happening to them. And as long as the jury can accept that and understand it, then they can find someone guilty with very little evidence and just based on the words of that victim.
What do you think about the R. Kelly case? And first I'll ask you about, I think down in Fulton County, Georgia, they're talking about contacting the witnesses to try to bring up charges. As an attorney, practicing on both sides of the law, what would you say the percentages of him actually being convicted after all this time are brought in to, to face these charges? What do you think about that?
I think the percentage would be great if it was the feds bringing the case. And I think the feds have an opportunity here to bring a case under the Mann Act, 18 USC 2422. I believe that's the statute. Yeah, 18 USC 2422. Actually, let me read it. It says, whoever knowingly persuades, induces, entices, or coerces an individual to travel in interstate or foreign commerce on any territory or possession of the United States to engage in prostitution or in any sexual activity for which any person can be charged with a criminal offense or attempts to do so shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years. The second section of that says, whoever does this with an individual who has not attained the age of 18 years, right, can be fined and or imprisoned for not less than 10 years or for life, right? And so the statute can probably go back at least 5 years. So they can go at least to 2013. And I'm sure that they can find at least that one girl who was having sex with the young girl. And she doesn't seem to be like she's not willing to be a cooperative witness. I think that they could build a case against him if they wanted to. The problem is that unfortunately Black women, and I say this all the time, we are the least protected species on this planet. And oftentimes our pain goes unrecognized and unacknowledged, and like Chance said, unreal to many people, right? Because we have been so sexualized in this society that it is hard for many men to fathom that we could be violated in that way. We can be violated sexually because we are so over sexualized that if some man says that he had sex with us, we must have consented. Of course we consented, right? And so I'm about to get upset.
You know what? If you don't mind, Mr. Shabazz, you kind of led me to my next question, and that is just to get away from the attorney table real quick and the professionalism real quick. Just give us a perspective of a Black woman in this whole situation, because it's a lot going on. And we come on this platform often, and we try and pride ourselves in being as objective as possible. That being said, we're looking at it from a perspective of two Black men. And we're really looking forward to having you on the show just to be able to have this kind of dialogue. But in particular, given everything that's going on, get your perspective as a Black woman just about what it seems like there's a divide right now between Black men and Black women, in particular this situation. And it's something that's stemming and has been going on throughout history, throughout our time. Speak on it from your perspective, if you don't mind.
It's difficult because, you know, obviously we have to deal with the history of molestation in our own community, in the Black community, right? And the reality, the realities that lie within that. But that can never serve as an excuse, right? As an excuse to justify the behavior that R. Kelly has engaged in over the past, I don't know, 20 years or whatever. I was done with R. Kelly after I saw the video. I saw the video, immediately so. And it was readily obvious to me that that was a child in the video. And I didn't need any more than that. Because a lot of people don't seem to understand that it does not matter. It does not matter to the law, and it does not matter to decent people that a young girl consented to sex, right? Because at that age, at any age of minority, under 16 and under, you are not capable. You are not capable of consenting. And the law provides for that, because statutory rape is a strict liability crime. That's one of the only strict liability crimes there is. And by strict liability, I mean it doesn't require any mens rea. You don't have to have any intent to have slept with a minor. It doesn't matter that you thought she was 18. It doesn't matter you thought she was 19 when in actuality she was 13 or 14 or 15. Mistake in fact is not a defense at all, right? And so even the law is outraged by men who say, well, these young girls, or I heard the excuse back in the days, our people were getting married at 13 and 14 years old. Yeah, back in the days, our people were slaves too, right? So what's the point? What is your point, right? We progress as a people naturally. And so it doesn't make sense to me that anyone would hearken back to what we used to be to justify what we are. That just can't be. That can't be. It can't be. And I want to see him in jail. I'm sorry. I want to see him in jail. I want to see him in jail. And I have no patience and or tolerance for anyone, male or female, who finds any justification in this behavior. It's just, there's just none there. None.
Right. Talk about how difficult it is as an attorney having to take on clients that you know may be guilty, or you know their entire situation, in particular maybe something like this, and you said you're very passionate about it, but you have to separate your personal from your professional. Talk about, just get into that zone and get into how that is.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I try to explain to people is that I'm very clear on what my job is as a criminal defense attorney, right? I am not out to prove the truth of what occurred. That's not my job. That's not my job. My job, very simply, is to put the people to their burden. And let me say that again. The burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. My job is to ensure that every person has a zealous defense. Every person that I represent has a zealous defense. And if the people prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, they did so because they had competent evidence to do so with. That's my job. That's it. And so whether or not the person did it is never a factor for me, because I can never know that, right? You know, there are some, there's a quote, I forget who says it, but there, you know, there are our things that we know, our known knowns, and there are some known unknowns, and then there are unknown unknowns, right? There's no way for me to know whether a person actually committed the crime unless they confess. And I promise you, people just don't. They don't say, you know, I did it, but I need you to get me off. They don't do that. They typically maintain their innocence, you know, until, you know, to the end where you see the Richard Gere movie where the guy, he gets off, turns back and goes, you know, says some slick shit like, yeah, thank you, right? And then you're like, but there's really no room for me to engage in that sort of thinking, because it will affect my ability to defend my client with the zealousness that he is entitled to under the Constitution. And so I don't concern myself with that. I'm concerned with what the evidence proves. If the evidence proves that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, then the jury will find you guilty. And the evidence does not prove that, then you will be found not guilty. And let's be clear, a finding of not guilty is not a finding of innocence. That's not the same thing, right? And so when we think about trials like O.J. Simpson, and most Black people swear for God he did that shit, right? We think he did it, right? And but we know he was found not guilty. And so that is the prime example of someone who we believe was found not guilty because the evidence was deficient, but we don't think he was innocent.
Mm-hmm. Did I don't know, are you aware of the details of the Charlemagne and God? Have you been following that in the media?
This is the one where he said he was taking it, he was going out on a date and that he slipped or something, but then he justified it by saying she had previously agreed to have sex with him, and then he had sex with her while she was pretty much passed out.
No, not that. It's another one where that's one.
Because that's the one that I'm not with. I don't understand why he still has a job. But
right now, it's the one where Jessica Reed, where she came back out after a number of years, pretty much saying that Charlemagne at a party a long time ago pretty much raped her.
Oh.
But the evidence, the discovery came out that came out and pretty much said when they took the rape analysis, none of his fluids or anything, or his urine or whatever they take, you know, seminal, blood, saliva, none of the stuff matched. So he was pretty much acquitted for that. So if you're not, we won't talk about it if you don't know.
But he went. Let me just say, he went to trial. I don't remember that. I didn't know that he went to trial.
No, he didn't go. He didn't go to trial. They gave him a he took a plea deal on the case. He took a plea deal on the case, yeah, on the case. But the girl came back out and pretty much said because her mom didn't want her to go on trial pretty much and go testify against him. So they kind of just fell back from the situation. But now she's coming out saying that she was raped. You know what I mean? But you know, we'll deal with that one.
It's too late. Well, the answer is too late because it sounds like he's already prosecuted and he is entitled to the protections of double jeopardy. So unless the federal government is going to pick that up, because it's the dual sovereignty, then only the federal government can do a subsequent prosecution that doesn't violate double jeopardy. I don't know if you guys know that, but we can talk about that another time. Yeah. Double jeopardy doesn't apply to federal government. It's a separate sovereignty. But she probably should out of luck at this point, unless she's trying to get money.
But anyway, just a few more questions. I know your time is very valuable.
Sure.
I want to ask you, about Black men in police. You did a few videos on your channel also about interaction, with police. Could you just give us, things that we, should do, shouldn't do when interacting with police? Because that, I just got pulled over yesterday.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and it's really intense. It's really you know, I'll tell you about it another time. But what do you think about that?
Okay. So I have a video. It talks about the 5 R's. What are called the 5 R's, which are the 5 R's of a police interaction. And this is for everyone, not just Black men, but Black women, Black children, especially, you know, our kids, our young people. I have a 23-year-old and a 15-year-old, both boys. So, you know, I need to arm them just like I arm the people. So the 5 R's is when you get stopped by the police, whether you are on foot or in your car. Don't run. Don't run. That's the first R. Don't run. Because we saw what happened with Walter Scott. He was in his car. He got out and he ran. He got shot in the back. Don't run. Right? We saw what happened to the young man. I don't remember what county it was, but he ran and he got shot in the back. Don't run. Okay? You need to live. If there's any redress to be had, you need to live. You need to survive the encounter. Okay? Don't run. So the second R is don't reach. Don't reach. A lot of times when you are in an encounter, you're nervous. You might be fidgeting. The police are equally as nervous, right? They don't know what you have on in your pockets, under your jacket, in your shoe. They don't, you know, they got a gun. They don't know if you got a gun, right? And so they may say, listen, you got any ID on you? You might think that's a directive. That's not. That's a question, right? Do you have any ID on you is not an invitation for you to reach into your pocket. Don't reach, right? The answer is yes, I have ID while your hands are still where the cop can visibly see them. Yes, I have ID. It's in my right pocket, in my left pocket, my back pocket, my jacket pocket, in the glove compartment, wherever it is, you can articulate that without moving, without reaching. Right? Because police officers sudden moves, that's a justified shooting, man. And you and your family is gonna be like, but he ain't had nothing. You asking for his ID. Well, I thought he was going for a gun. Because he Black and his skin is a weapon. It's weaponized. And it immediately puts me in a state of fear and panic. And society understands that. That's why they walk. All right, so that's the second R, don't reach. The third R is don't react, right? Because Black people, y'all tend to think y'all know your rights when you, most of the time you don't, right? And so when the police stop you, you all like, I know my rights. You can't be doing, right? And you're only going to escalate the situation. So please don't react with the, you know, if the cop is like, you know, all right, I'm gonna let you go. Well, you better have let me go, punk. And come on, man, please, can we not do that? Why do we do that? Don't react. Okay, so that's 3. The fourth one is remain silent. Remain silent, because I say this all the time. People don't know the import of their words. And let me give you an example. Say, for instance, the cop is investigating a robbery that happened at the 7-Eleven. You just happen to be coming from the 7-Eleven, but you don't know that the 7-Eleven got robbed, right? The cop stops you, and they're like, yo, where you coming from? Remain silent, because as soon as you say I'm coming from 7-Eleven, well, you match the description of that, right? So remain silent, because you don't know what the import of your words are. And the last one is request a lawyer, right? So if the police stop you, there's only one question you should have for them, and that is, am I free to leave? Right? Because there's only 2 ways the cop can answer that. You either are free to leave, at which time you should leave. And you should go quietly, and you should not be looking back talking about you better have, right? That's not going to work. Leave, right? And if the cop says no, you are not free to leave, then what are you going to say? Well, I'm going to remain silent then. Then I have the right to remain silent, and I'm going to request a lawyer. That's the last R. Request a lawyer. Request a lawyer. And you have to request a lawyer unequivocally. You cannot request a lawyer by asking the police officer, do you think I need a lawyer? That's not asking for a lawyer, right? Because the cop is never going to tell you you should get a lawyer, right? No, you have to unequivocally state, I want a lawyer. I am not having any conversation with you. I want a lawyer. Okay, so you have to do that. So am I free to leave? If you are, leave. If you're not, remain silent, request a lawyer. Don't forget the 5 R's, because I think that they will keep a lot of people safe.
Awesome. Just a quick question before I let you go. Are you licensed? Do you practice in New Jersey as well, or just New York?
Only New York.
Ah, man, okay.
No, I know. Only New York.
You do entertainment?
Myself, I would practice everywhere. I promise.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Do you what areas do you specialize? Do you specialize in entertainment by any chance, or no? Okay, criminal. All right.
I also teach. I teach other areas of law. I teach real estate. I teach civil law. I teach labor law, employment law. I teach a bunch of different types of law, but I only practice criminal law.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, we definitely appreciate your time. Oh, you know what? Real quick, just real quick, because
I gotta do one thing because I'm gonna get yelled at if I don't do this.
Yeah, right.
I gotta promote my book.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
Promote it. Promote away.
I gotta promote my book. So I have a book on my weight loss journey. I was a fat kid, which made me a fat adult. And so I have a book called Black Girl Slim. It's available on Amazon. Black Girl Slim, and it details my journey, and it's a journey that I think a lot of Black women should take, because we are spending far too much money on hair weaves, and you're gonna look good in that coffin. Your hair gonna look real good when you're dead, because we are leading in obesity and diabetes and high cholesterol and high blood pressure, and 4 out of 5 Black women are overweight and or obese. And it's a real problem that we have to address, because without the Black woman, we will have no nation.
Tell us where we can find your book.
And it's on Amazon. The book is on Amazon, and my website is Ikiespeaks.net. IKIE speaks.net.
Okay, yeah. We're gonna make sure that we do an article on it, and make sure we put the link in the videos that we post, and make sure everybody goes, to get that book. We definitely appreciate, and we would love to definitely, hope you enjoyed yourself. You can come back anytime you want. We appreciate it, and
great questions.
Yes,
absolutely. Thank you for having us. Thank you for allowing us to have an hour of your time. Yes. Like Ogai said, this will be on 3 different platforms: Hip Hop News Uncensored, Viral Hip Hop News, and the Uncensored Truth Podcast. So enjoy the content. We appreciate your time, and we're about to go live, so we're about to set up again.
All right. Y'all have a great show then. Thank you for having me. Ike Speaks. I love you. I really do.
It's only one. Mo.